Go back to your slums, idiot!
The cold voice of Judge William Harrison, a white man in his 50s, cut through the suffocating air of the courtroom. Before the bench stood Tiana Davis, a 17-year-old black girl, frozen in place amid a sea of white faces, twisted into mocking smiles. She lowered her head, trembling hands gathering the scattered papers one by one. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. Her young heart was learning to withstand its first storm of injustice. Clutched tightly to her chest was a small notebook, seemingly meaningless. No one in that room knew that the messy handwriting inside would one day become the very evidence that brought this entire system of power crashing down. Harrison stepped down from the judge's bench, his footsteps echoing like deliberate warnings. He closed in, yanked the file from Tiana's hands, letting the papers scatter across the cold stone floor. "Pick them up." The tip of his polished shoe tapped impatiently as Tiana bent down. Her public defender, Mr. Walsh, stayed silent, eyes lowered, avoiding hers. "Remember your place, girl," Harrison sneered, turning back toward his throne of authority. Tiana bit her lip. Her trembling hands clutched the small notebook against her chest like a fragile shield. No one in that courtroom knew. That very notebook held the evidence that would destroy Harrison's career within a few short hours. The first pale light of dawn spread across the county courthouse. Tiana wore the simplest blue blouse she owned. Her father, James, walked beside her, his maintenance uniform neatly pressed, trying to look tidy despite its faded fabric from too many night shifts. "Remember what I told you," James whispered. "Stand tall, speak clearly, look them in the eye." Tiana nodded, gripping her notebook tightly. She had spent weeks preparing, documenting every trial, every word, every frown. Down the hallway, Attorney Walsh finally found her case file buried under a heap of papers. "Davis, Tiana Davis. Ah, the hotel trespassing case." He brushed past her without looking up. "Judge Harrison's court today. Listen, you should take the plea deal. First offense. Well, if we don't count the park incident. I didn't. Don't argue. He doesn't go easy on people like you. Community service beats juvenile detention." Across town, William Harrison adjusted his silk tie in the mirror of his Westlake mansion. His wife set his coffee cup in its usual spot. "Another juvenile case?" she asked. "Yeah, a bunch of delinquents wasting the court's time," he muttered, glancing at his Rolex before hitting speed dial. "Charles. Yeah, that's your Grand Hotel break-in case. Don't worry, I'll make an example of her. People need to know where they don't belong." Inside the courtroom, Tiana sat quietly, observing. A white teenage boy caught stealing received a mild warning and 20 hours of community service. Another boy, a businessman's son, vandalized property but only paid a fine after his father had a private word with Harrison. Then came a black boy accused of disorderly conduct. Harrison's tone shifted, colder, sharper, laced with contempt. The harshest penalty, paired with cruel insults. Tiana scribbled furiously in her notebook, each line more detailed than the last. Dates, times, charges, race, punishment. When her name was finally called, a woman in a black suit from the back row leaned forward, eyes sharp as a blade fixed on Harrison. Tiana stepped forward, small but steady steps. "Another hotel trespassing case," Harrison sighed theatrically. "It's everywhere now. Kids these days think they can go wherever they please." Walsh cleared his throat. "Your Honor, my client is a first-time offender. We request leniency." "Second time," Harrison interrupted, tapping the file. "I see an incident at Westside Park." "I was just studying there," Tiana said softly. "Our power was out. The park has lights." "You may speak when I tell you to," Harrison snapped. "Counselor, control your client." The prosecutor stood. The defendant was apprehended in a restricted area of the Grand Hotel, near a conference room storing valuable equipment. Camera footage confirms her presence. "What do you have to say for yourself?" Harrison demanded. "I was invited to attend a program." "A program?" he scoffed. Grand Hotel doesn't host programs for... He stopped halfway, but everyone understood what he meant. Walsh stammered, "Your Honor, perhaps an administrative penalty." "Silence. This court values order. Today it's trespassing, tomorrow it's theft. This girl has a history of showing up where she doesn't belong." Tiana's father clenched his fists, veins bulging under his skin. A police officer approached him with a warning glare. Tiana kept writing. Her pen didn't stop, even as her lips trembled. "What are you writing?" Harrison barked. "Just notes, Your Honor." "Give it here." She hesitated, then handed over the notebook. Harrison flipped through a few pages and fell silent. The pages were filled with tight handwriting, dates, and meticulous statistics, every trial showing a clear divide between white and black defendants. For a brief moment, his smug smile vanished. Then, regaining his cold composure, he tossed the notebook back toward Tiana. "You're a researcher now? Note-taking won't change the outcome." Harrison folded his arms, leaning back in his chair. "I've decided. Community service isn't enough. You need to learn humility." Walsh tried to object, but Harrison raised a hand. "Stand up, Miss Davis. Step into the center of the room." Tiana rose, her heart pounding. "Now tell the court, why do you think you deserve to step foot inside a 5-star hotel like the Grand?" "I was invited to attend a scholarship program." "Scholarship?" Harrison enunciated each syllable as the courtroom chuckled softly. "National scholarships don't meet in hotels. They meet in schools. Who do you think you're fooling?" Tiana stood motionless, her calm face masking the sting of humiliation. "Turn around," Harrison ordered. "Let everyone see your style of dress." Tiana hesitated. "That wasn't a command," he smirked. "It was a request." She slowly turned. Blue blouse, dark skirt, clean but worn. Finally, Walsh spoke up. "Your Honor, this behavior is highly irregular and could..." "Walsh, are you questioning my conduct?" Harrison's voice dropped, each word deliberate, like a blade being drawn. "I could hold you in contempt as quickly as your client." Walsh bowed his head, his voice dying away. Harrison picked up the phone and hit the speaker button. "I have Charles Whitfield, owner of the Grand Hotel, on the line." "Mr. Whitfield," he began, "was there any educational program held at your hotel's conference center last Tuesday afternoon?" A male voice crackled through the speaker. "Absolutely not, Your Honor. Our conference facilities are for corporate guests and private events only." Security reported a young woman seen near the Platinum Room, where valuable equipment is stored. While the exchange went on, the black woman sitting quietly at the back continued to observe, her tablet camera silently recording every word. 2 men in black suits slipped in, took seats beside her, and spoke in low, serious tones. At the center of the courtroom, Tiana stood tall. A tear fell, but she blinked hard. No, she wouldn't let them see her break. "Thank you, Mr. Whitfield," Harrison said smugly as he hung up. "So you still insist you were there for an academic program?" "Yes, Your Honor," Tiana replied, her voice low but steady. "So stubborn," Harrison sighed dramatically. Suddenly, Tiana's phone vibrated softly in her pocket. The screen lit up. "Stay strong. Justice is coming. You are not alone." "This court will recess for 15 minutes, Harrison declared. "Miss Davis, do not leave the building." The gavel slammed down. The room erupted, whispers, pitying looks, sneers, all blending into one suffocating hum. Tiana returned to her seat, her expression serene, calm as a lake in a storm. "I need to use the restroom," she murmured. James simply nodded, eyes warm. "You're stronger than I ever knew." "I'm proud of you, sweetheart." She hurried into the ladies' restroom and locked the door. Only when she was alone did she let the tears fall. Her fingers gripped the sink, knuckles white. She splashed cold water on her face, washing away the traces of weakness. The door opened. A confident black woman in her 40s, neatly dressed, stepped inside. "Tiana Davis?" Her voice was low, clear. Yes. The woman smiled faintly. Dr. Olivia Bennett, director of the National Scholarship Program. She handed over a card embossed with a silver logo. We had an interview scheduled at the Grand Hotel, remember? Too bad. It was interrupted. Recognition flickered in Tiana's eyes. But the hotel owner said, Charles Whitfield doesn't personally handle room bookings, Bennett explained. We work through the parent company, via the Education Diversity Initiative. They reserve that conference hall every quarter. She leaned lightly against the sink. I'm sorry I didn't step in sooner. When you missed the interview, we looked into it. And what I just witnessed in that courtroom. Disturbing, but not surprising. Bennett's gaze shifted to the notebook clutched against Tiana's chest. It was your documentation that caught our attention. You're not alone, Tiana. Several students of color have filed complaints against Judge Harrison this past year. In his office, Harrison loosened his tie and picked up his private phone. Bill here, Senator Grayson. A man's voice answered, just a reminder. Next month's judicial review includes a discussion on diversity within the bench. Harrison scoffed. That political correctness nonsense again? 20 years, and no one's dared to challenge one of my rulings. Still, I'd be careful, Grayson warned. Relax, Harrison said confidently. I'm handling a perfect example right now. A black girl who thinks she can wander wherever she pleases. I'll make an example of her for the whole town. In the restroom, Bennett was on the phone again. Can you confirm the scholarship meeting at the Grand Hotel? Booking code A3205. Thank you. She hung up, then dialed another number. This is the State Judicial Oversight Board office, correct? Yes, the hearing is in progress right now. Everything is being recorded. One last call. Thomas Reynolds, Marshall and Reed Law Firm? Yes, we need pro bono representation, immediately. Dr. Bennett turned to Tiana. We've been collecting evidence of Judge Harrison's discriminatory behavior for months. Your notebook is the final piece. Behavioral patterns, language, statistical data. Everything aligns. But we needed a recording inside the courtroom, and you just provided that. The door opened. James stepped in, his face a mix of confusion and fury. What did that man do to my daughter? Bennett met his eyes. Mr. Davis, your daughter was treated unjustly, and now we have proof. She was lawfully present at that hotel. Harrison humiliated her solely because of her skin color. James clenched his fists. So what do we do now? Go back into the courtroom. Stay calm. No matter what he says, the truth will speak for itself. The turning point is coming. Tiana took a deep breath. I can do this. She glanced at the woman who had just entered. The name badge on her lanyard gleamed under the fluorescent light. Governor's Ethics Commission, Special Investigations Unit. The woman nodded slightly and tapped her tablet. Every word, every move inside that courtroom was now being recorded. The sound of the gavel echoed. Harrison returned, his face tense. After careful consideration, he began. The court has decided on an appropriate sentence for the defendant, Miss Davis. Papers rustled. The defendant will write a public apology to be published in the county newspaper, admitting to trespassing and deceit before the court. In addition, she will perform 200 hours of community service. A murmur swept through the courtroom. Harrison continued, his voice cold as ice. And the location for her service will be the Grand Hotel. Cleaning bathrooms might teach her a more effective lesson about respecting private property than any apology could. Walsh winced. Your Honor, that punishment is excessive for a first-time offender. Second time, Harrison cut in, voice sharp as steel. Do you wish to object, Walsh, or would you rather share a cell with your client? The room froze. Then, a clear, steady voice broke the silence. Objection! Every head turned toward the back. A tall man in a crisp black suit walked down the aisle. Thomas Reynolds, Marshall and Reed Law Firm. As of this moment, I officially represent Miss Davis. The courtroom erupted. Harrison's face blanched. Mr. Reynolds, this is highly irregular. But behind him, Dr. Bennett and two investigators from the Ethics Commission rose to their feet, their expressions like steel. The balance of power had just shifted. "We are in the middle of sentencing, Mr. Reynolds," Harrison hissed. "Precisely," Reynolds replied smoothly, "which is why I must intervene. Right now." He placed a thick stack of papers on the bench, his tone calm but icy. "A formal motion to substitute counsel has been filed. The sentence has not yet been entered into record, therefore my intervention is fully procedural." Harrison flipped through the documents, scanning for any loophole to deny the motion. There was none. He inhaled sharply and nodded curtly. "Fine. Mr. Walsh, you are dismissed." Walsh quickly gathered his files, visibly relieved as he left. Reynolds took half a step forward, his voice firm but respectful. "Your Honor, the defense moves to dismiss all charges against Miss Davis due to lack of evidence and procedural violations." "Denied!" Harrison slammed the gavel. Reynolds didn't flinch. "Then allow me to ask, why was Miss Davis's case handled so differently from the others heard this same morning?" Harrison's knuckles tightened around the gavel. "Each case is unique, Counselor." "Indeed," Reynolds nodded, opening a thick folder, "which is why I reviewed 6 months of this court's sentencing data. And what I found is unusual, a striking pattern. Sentencing severity shifts significantly based on the defendant's race." Harrison slammed the desk. "Are you accusing this court of misconduct?" "I'm merely reading the data into record, Your Honor." The air grew heavy. Murmurs rippled across the gallery. Several new faces had entered, notepads in hand, eyes focused. "I'll hold you in contempt," Harrison barked. Reynolds replied evenly, "Please note for the record the court's hostility toward a lawful defense inquiry." He stepped closer, his voice deep and unwavering. "Then explain, Your Honor. Why was the defendant's legitimate reason for being at the hotel never verified before trial?" The courtroom fell silent. Harrison's shoulders tensed, his face flushed crimson. "The hotel owner confirmed no such program existed. His word is sufficient." Reynolds smiled faintly and produced a sealed envelope. "Your Honor, I submit into evidence an official document from the Grand Hotel's Event Management Office, confirming that the National Scholarship Program reserved the Oakwood Conference Room from 2 to 5 p.m. on the day in question." He held the documents up. Harrison took them, flipping through quickly. Embossed logo, signatures, seals. Unassailable. "There's more," Reynolds continued evenly. "An email from Dr. Olivia Bennett, program director, inviting Miss Davis to the interview." The prosecutor shot to his feet. "The prosecution was never provided with these materials." "Because," Reynolds replied sharply, "no one bothered to verify anything. The burden of proof lies with the prosecution, not the burden of innocence with us." Harrison's phone rang. He put it on speaker, still trying to project authority. "Mr. Whitfield, owner of the Grand Hotel, correct? Was there a scholarship program at your hotel last week?" Whitfield's voice trembled slightly. "I don't personally handle all bookings, Your Honor. It's possible the parent company arranged it without my knowledge." Reynolds cut in, his tone like a blade of ice. "So you testified before the court without full information?" "Objection!" the prosecutor shouted. "Sustained!" Harrison snapped, trying to regain control. "Mr. Reynolds, you may not cross-examine a witness without leave of court." Behind them, more people slipped quietly into the gallery. A woman wearing a badge reading State Bar Association, Judicial Oversight, sat in the front row, notebook open. Sweat formed on Harrison's temples, even as the air conditioning hummed. He tugged at his collar, voice trembling slightly. "The court will review this new material. However, I consider this a deliberate attempt to ambush the bench." "Your Honor," Reynolds said, his eyes suddenly blazing, "if proper procedure had been followed, this evidence would have surfaced long ago. A single phone call to verify could have spared an innocent student from public humiliation." Harrison spun toward Tiana, searching for a weakness. The defendant should have been clearer about her so-called imaginary meeting. Reynolds' voice hardened. She tried, repeatedly. The court cut her off every time. The audio record will confirm that. Whispers rippled through the courtroom. Several people nodded. They remembered. The prosecutor looked down, pretending to shuffle papers, avoiding eye contact. Harrison checked his watch, forcing a smirk. This court has no time for trivial cases like this. Reynolds folded his arms, voice low but sharp as steel. Then explain, Your Honor. Why are cases involving defendants of color deemed trivial, yet take twice as long as equivalent cases involving white defendants? Harrison froze. What are you implying? No implication, Your Honor. Just public data. An average of 43 minutes for black defendants, 17 for white ones. Same charges. Get out! Harrison roared, slamming the gavel so hard it cracked the echo chamber like a gunshot. This is contempt of court. Reynolds didn't move. His tone was steady, almost calm. I'm only reading data. Whoever truly holds this court in contempt of justice, the public will decide. A long silence. No one rose. Even the bailiff at the door hesitated, glancing around. With the court's permission, Reynolds said, the defense calls a witness, Dr. Olivia Bennett. Before Harrison could object, Bennett had already stepped forward, ID badge glinting on her chest. She took the oath and sat upright at the witness stand. Dr. Bennett, Reynolds began, please explain to the court. What is the National Scholarship Program, and why was Miss Davis present at the Grand Hotel that day? Bennett met his gaze squarely, her voice firm and clear. We seek outstanding students from underrepresented communities. Miss Tiana Davis is one of them, maintaining a 4.0 GPA while working part-time and volunteering at the community library. Objection, Harrison interjected. Character testimony is irrelevant to the charge of trespassing. On the contrary, Your Honor, Reynolds countered swiftly. It directly concerns motive. She was there for a lawful purpose. Bennett continued, calm, measured, as if she had been waiting for this moment. We chose the Grand Hotel as a neutral professional venue accessible to applicants from various districts. Harrison leaned back, his composure slipping. Numbers, evidence, testimony, all forming a clear, damning picture. For the first time, his authority wasn't absolute. Why not hold it in a school or public library? Harrison snapped, desperate to cling to control. Because we want our candidates to feel valued, Dr. Bennett answered gently. Many come from neighborhoods that have never seen professional environments. The hotel is our way of showing that their worth is no less than that of the business leaders society so readily respects. The prosecutor, sensing the shift in balance, stood. Your Honor, in light of new evidence, the prosecution requests a continuance to verify. But Harrison didn't hear him. His eyes locked on Tiana, still seated, her notebook open, pen gliding across the page, recording everything. Enough, Miss Davis, Harrison snapped. Hand over that notebook at once. Reynolds rose, voice cold as glass. Objection. Those notes are privileged communications between client and counsel, protected by law. I want to see what she's been writing about my court, Harrison barked, and the room froze. His concern was no longer justice. It was reputation. Tiana lifted her gaze, meeting his eyes. Actually, she said clearly, I'd be happy to explain, if you're ready for everyone else to hear it too. A breathless silence fell. Harrison hesitated, then gestured stiffly. Go ahead. Tiana stood tall, sunlight from the window slicing across her face. Young, steady, defiant. She was no longer the timid girl from that morning. She was a woman now, carrying the torch of justice in her hands. For the past 7 months, she began, I've been studying judicial behavior across multiple courts as part of a student research project on fairness within our county's legal system. She opened her notebook, pages filled with charts, tables, dates, and precise notes. What started as a school assignment turned into something much more disturbing. Defendants of color consistently received harsher sentences than white defendants charged with the same crimes. The acquittal rate for white defendants was 78% higher. Public defenders assigned to defendants of color had an average of just 4.3 minutes to prepare, compared to 12.7 minutes for white defendants. Harrison started to interrupt, but Reynolds leaned in quietly. "Your Honor, you did just ask her to explain. Please allow her to finish." Tiana continued, her voice steady, clear, and commanding. "I tracked 137 cases, 42 of them right here in this courtroom. The data is undeniable. In your court, black defendants receive sentences 67% longer on average. You interrupt them an average of 7.2 times per hearing, compared to just 1.3 times for white defendants." A wave of murmurs spread across the room. Harrison pounded his gavel repeatedly. "Absurd! The foolish ramblings of a child who doesn't understand the law?" Dr. Bennett rose, her eyes alight. "Miss Tiana Davis is no ordinary child, Your Honor. She is the youngest recipient of the State Youth Leadership Award, presented by Governor Chandler last year. Her research on judicial inequality was selected for presentation at the National Youth Constitutional Conference." She approached the bench and placed a folder down. The meeting at the Grand Hotel wasn't just a scholarship interview, it was also a scheduled consultation with their Community Partnership Division, part of her study on judicial reform models. From the back row, the woman with the badge stepped forward, voice firm and resonant. "Samantha Williams, Director, State Judicial Ethics Commission. Your court, Judge Harrison, has been under review following multiple complaints, and Miss Davis's data aligns perfectly with our findings." Harrison's face turned pale. "This is a setup, a coordinated attack." "No, Your Honor," Williams replied coolly. "This is called accountability." Reynolds raised a tablet. "Here is security footage from the Grand Hotel, clearly showing Miss Davis being escorted into the Oakwood room by hotel staff at the exact time she was accused of trespassing." The screen lit up. Tiana appeared, smiling politely, presenting her student ID, then being guided by an employee wearing a name badge. Everything was clear, unmistakable. "The charge of trespassing is false," Reynolds stated firmly. "She was lawfully invited, had a legitimate purpose, and remained within authorized areas." Williams faced the courtroom, her voice steady but thunderous. "The Ethics Commission has gathered evidence of bias and abuse of authority by Judge Harrison for months. Today, in the presence of witnesses, we have sufficient grounds." She opened her briefcase and produced a document bearing the seal of the State Supreme Court. "Judge William Harrison, by authority of the State Judicial Ethics Commission and the State Supreme Court, you are hereby suspended from duty, pending full investigation into misconduct and racial discrimination in your rulings." The gavel slipped from Harrison's hand, clattering against the bench with a hollow clack. No one spoke. Only the rhythmic sound of the court stenographer's keys filled the air. Hours later, the county courthouse was abuzz. In the main chamber, Chief Judge Eleanor Michaels presided over a special session. Unlike Harrison, she listened, eyes kind, voice even. After reviewing all presented evidence, she declared, "This court hereby vacates all charges against Miss Tiana Davis. The record will reflect that this case lacked legal foundation and violated due process. On behalf of the justice system, I apologize for the treatment you endured. That was not justice. It was its failure." Soft applause broke out. Not formal, but heartfelt. Tiana's father gripped her hand, eyes glistening. Across the aisle, Charles Whitfield, the hotel owner, rose and approached. "Miss Davis," he said sincerely, "I owe you an apology. I spoke without knowing the full truth and unknowingly contributed to this injustice. After learning about your research, I'd like to offer you an internship in our Corporate Social Responsibility Division. Your understanding of justice could help us reflect on our own." Tiana smiled, small, calm, unwavering. She closed her notebook. This time, her hands didn't tremble. The narrator's voice rose softly, like a breath. "Justice doesn't live in stone walls or black robes. It lives in those who take notes, who stand up, and who dare to speak truth, even when the whole room stands against them." The camera pulled back. Tiana stepped out of the courthouse, afternoon sunlight spilling across her face. Behind her, the old carved words read, "Equal justice under law." And today, for the first time, those words finally meant something real. The city was buzzing with the news. At the headquarters of the State Judicial Ethics Commission, Director Samantha Williams and her team entered the most crucial phase, a full audit of every case Judge William Harrison had ruled on in the past 2 decades. On massive screens, thousands of rulings, data tables, and charts appeared, pieces of a long-hidden truth. "The pattern is even clearer than we expected," Williams said, her voice cold and resolute. Defendants of color received sentences an average of 60% longer than white defendants for the same offenses, and the rate of probation for white defendants 7 times higher. A young staffer hurried into the room, report in hand. "Director, there are 23 particularly severe cases. 3 people are still serving time, despite circumstances identical to white defendants who received probation." Williams nodded, her voice firm. "Flag them immediately. Contact the public defender's office. We'll file for sentence reviews right away." The media exploded. Headlines screamed across every front page. "Teen turns the tables on justice." "Student exposes bias inside the courtroom." Reporters crowded outside the county courthouse. Microphones, lights, cameras, every lens pointed toward 17-year-old Tiana Davis, who had become a symbol of justice overnight. By afternoon, the tone of coverage grew more serious. The State Tribune published an editorial, "When the judge must also be judged." On primetime television, Professor Ela Montgomery, an expert in judicial ethics, spoke. "Failure is allowing a judge to act with bias for years. Success is seeing justice reclaimed through the persistence of a young woman and a system finally willing to hold itself accountable." In a packed press conference room, Tiana stood beside Dr. Bennett, calm amid a forest of microphones. "I'm not here to attack any individual," she said clearly. "My research was about recording a system, one where even the smallest bias can alter thousands of lives." The room fell silent. Moments later, Senator James Parkman stepped forward. "Based on Ms. Davis's research and the Ethics Commission's findings," he announced, "we will introduce the Judicial Accountability Act next week, which includes independent reviews of sentencing patterns, mandatory training on implicit bias, and a more transparent judicial appointment process." Tiana was invited to speak at the bill's announcement. Senator Parkman told reporters, "Her documentation is the piece of evidence we've needed for years." Meanwhile, at the Grand Hotel headquarters, the board launched an internal investigation. The results stunned them. Gregory Palmer, assistant executive to Whitfield, had deliberately withheld information about scholarship programs. "I just thought those events didn't fit the hotel's image," Palmer said flatly during questioning. "They don't generate revenue and attract the wrong kind of guests." A termination order was signed immediately. A company-wide statement followed. Grand Hotel reaffirms its commitment to inclusion and equality, expanding partnerships with community education programs. At his lakeside mansion, William Harrison drew the curtains closed. Media vans surrounded the property. He hired Julian Kraft, a high-profile defense attorney known for representing disgraced officials. "Judge Harrison's statements have been taken out of context," Kraft declared firmly at the gate. "His career speaks for itself. We're confident the investigation will clear his name." But the defense backfired almost instantly. Within hours, the Ethics Commission released transcripts, Harrison's own words from dozens of hearings, mockery, slurs, and blatant bias, captured verbatim. Even his longtime political allies began to distance themselves, awaiting the results of the investigation. At a press briefing, Governor Chandler stated, "The integrity of our justice system depends on fairness in every courtroom. The administration will monitor developments closely and act accordingly." Behind closed doors, the governor's advisors discussed permanent removal if misconduct was confirmed, while quietly vetting candidates known for supporting racial equity. The State Bar Association issued its own statement. "If proven, Such behavior represents a grave betrayal of professional ethics. We are committed to upholding the highest standards, even for those who wear the robe. Community legal organizations opened a hotline for anyone wrongfully sentenced under Harrison's tenure. Within 3 days, more than 200 calls were logged. Reynolds's firm, Marshall & Reed, announced it would provide pro bono representation for the most serious cases. Justice is not an abstract ideal, Reynolds said on national television. It's a constitutional promise, and it's our duty to protect it. By Monday, Tiana returned to school. Though she tried to blend in, the stares followed her. Admiration mixed with awe. Her history teacher smiled gently. Tiana, would you like to share your thoughts on citizenship and justice? Tiana stood, her voice slow but certain. Change doesn't always start with a shout. Sometimes it starts with paying attention, taking notes, and refusing to stay silent. If you see something wrong, speak up, because silence is its own form of complicity. The classroom fell quiet, then erupted in applause. A small moment, but the seed of something far greater. As the investigation widened, the digital audit team uncovered internal emails between Harrison and several prosecutors, exchanges discussing how to crack down on problem neighborhoods and stay tough on young men of color. The case officially escalated from an ethics violation to a potential criminal conspiracy. The largest chamber of the Judicial Commission was packed before the hearing began. Television cameras lined the back wall. Security officers checked IDs at every door. The side door opened. William Harrison entered, his once imposing frame now swallowed by an expensive suit that hung loose after 2 sleepless weeks. Beside him, attorney Julian Kraft whispered last-minute advice. Gone was the proud judge of old. Only a man bowing before justice remained. He took his seat at the defense table. The sight, the judge now judged, drew a hush over the entire room. 5 members of the Disciplinary Council filed in, led by Justice Rebecca Chen of the State Supreme Court. Their faces were cold, composed, metallic. This hearing, Justice Chen began, will determine whether Judge William Harrison has violated the Judicial Code of Conduct and the state constitution. This is not a criminal trial, but a proceeding to decide whether he remains fit to serve on the bench. Director Williams stepped forward, her arms full of documents. Members of the council, she said, what we uncovered is not mere misconduct, but a deliberate system of bias, sustained over many years. The cameras panned across the audience, where Tiana Davis sat quietly, eyes bright, the old notebook still in her hands, its final page blank. She smiled faintly. Perhaps this chapter of justice was being written in real time. Evidence was presented in precise order, each piece like a hammer blow in an unspoken indictment. The large screen flickered on. Charts, testimony from former defendants, court transcripts, and finally, the private emails between Harrison and the prosecutors. In this message, Director Williams pointed at the projection. Judge Harrison instructed Prosecutor Mark Phillips to seek maximum sentencing for defendants from troubled neighborhoods, while recommending probation for kids from the good side of town. A former court clerk, Alexis Rodriguez, took the stand. He told me to schedule cases with the right prosecutors for the right people. What that really meant was making sure black defendants faced the toughest prosecutors. Each testimony struck like a blow to the crumbling mask of authority. Then came Charles Whitfield, originally summoned as a character witness, who instead read a sworn statement. During a round of golf, he told me that tough sentences keep property values high and undesirable elements away from the nicer neighborhoods. I said nothing then, and that silence is the greatest regret of my life. Soon after, Prosecutor Mark Phillips admitted, no one ever gave a direct order, but everyone understood. If you didn't go along with him, your cases got buried at the bottom of the list. Young attorneys wanted promotions, and he knew that. The second day of hearings ended. Harrison requested to speak. Justice Chen nodded, perhaps hoping for a confession or remorse. He stepped to the podium, clutching trembling notes. In 20 years of service, he began hoarsely, I have always acted in the community's best interest. If there were misunderstandings, I regret. But as the council's questions tightened, the mask of humility cracked. Can you explain why you wrote an email instructing harsher sentencing for defendants from problem areas? Justice Chen asked. Harrison snapped, voice rising. You people don't understand reality. Someone has to make the hard decisions to keep order. And those hard decisions, Chen countered, only ever applied to defendants of color. A vein throbbed violently at Harrison's temple. Look at the data. Look where the crimes come from. If no one keeps them in line, the whole community pays the price. A collective gasp swept the room. The camera zoomed in on his flushed face. You want the truth? Harrison shouted. Some people understand opportunity. Others only understand consequences. I did what had to be done, and I'm not sorry. No one breathed. Only the furious tapping of reporters' keyboards filled the silence. The hearing was streamed live, his words spreading across social media within minutes. There was no misinterpreting them now. The council returned after less than 2 hours of deliberation. Justice Chen read the decision, voice calm but ringing with finality. The council finds that Judge William Harrison has committed gross violations of the Judicial Code of Conduct, demonstrated bias, abused his authority, and undermined public trust in the justice system. We recommend permanent removal from office and refer this matter to the State Bar for disbarment proceedings. Furthermore, the full record will be sent to the Attorney General's office for review of potential state and federal civil rights violations. Harrison sat motionless. 20 years of power and prestige collapsed in just 2 weeks. He rose slowly, staggering toward the hallway. There, waiting silently, was Tiana. The cameras turned to capture the moment their eyes met, the judge and the judged. No words were spoken, only a long, heavy silence, one that seemed to carry the weight of an entire generation. 6 months passed. The Harrison case was no longer a scandal. It had become a symbol of judicial reform. At the state capitol, Chief Justice Monroe addressed hundreds of judges at the annual judicial conference. Justice is not just written in the law, it lives in how we apply it equally to every person. The Harrison case forced us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Prejudice has long been embedded in our system. A statewide review following the scandal uncovered 5 other judges with similar sentencing patterns. 2 resigned. 3 were suspended pending investigation. This is not a purge, Williams said during a Bar Association forum. This is healing. Every biased ruling is a wound that erodes public trust. What we are doing now is stitching that trust back together. New policies were enacted. Mandatory annual bias awareness training for all judges. Public access to sentencing data by race, updated quarterly. Citizen oversight boards included in judicial appointment reviews. At the Grand Hotel, a new program launched, the Future Leaders Scholarship, for underprivileged youth interested in management and hospitality. We are honored to have Miss Tiana Davis serve as the student advisor to our scholarship board, said the new director of diversity. Her perspective helps us create opportunities that are real, not just promises. The camera panned across to Tiana, older now, more confident, her smile calm and assured. What was once tragedy had become inspiration. Her research continued to grow, funded by the State University's Department of Law and Criminal Justice. She presented at the National Judicial Reform Conference, where her methodology was adopted as a model for community-based court monitoring programs. The narrator's voice rose over a montage of images, new courthouses, classrooms, data screens, young faces taking notes. A single notebook changed an entire system, because justice doesn't collapse in a day. It collapses when we stop paying attention, and it is saved when someone dares to write the truth again. The camera lingered on the final shot. Tiana standing on her university campus, the wind flipping the last page of her notebook. She wrote one line: "Justice lives in those who refuse to stay silent." The light flared behind her. Fade out. The score swelled, deep, warm, full of hope. "What makes Davis's method so powerful," explained Professor James Richardson at a symposium, "is that she transformed what used to be dismissed as subjective perception into quantifiable data. When you prove that a judge interrupts black defendants 4 times more often than white ones, bias is no longer speculation, it's an undeniable fact." At the state capitol, the Judicial Accountability Act passed with rare bipartisan support. Governor Chandler signed it into law in a formal ceremony. Tiana Davis seated in the front row of honor, beside reformist judges and legislators. The governor's words echoed through the flashes of cameras. The phrase "equal justice under law" should not live only on marble walls. It is a promise we must fulfill through action. The new law mandated mandatory video recording of all courtroom proceedings, transparent sentencing guidelines, independent review processes for judicial misconduct complaints. And all of it began with one girl and her small notebook. A special review panel examined more than 300 of Harrison's rulings. Dozens of convictions were overturned or reduced. A compensation fund was established for those whose lives had been destroyed by judicial bias. "I lost 3 years of my life for a crime a white kid got probation for," said Marcus Turner, newly freed. "I can't get that time back, but at least now, people believe we were telling the truth." Law schools across the state added the Harrison case to their professional ethics curriculum as a permanent warning. The bar exam introduced mandatory questions on judicial bias and whistleblower responsibility. A new generation of lawyers was being trained with a collective memory. That silence, too, can be a crime. When Tiana prepared to graduate high school, an envelope arrived bearing the seal of the White House. Inside was an invitation to join the National Commission on Judicial Reform. She smiled, her father, James Davis, watching with tearful pride. 1 year later, she returned to courtroom number 3, now renamed Equal Justice Chamber. Morning light poured through the tall windows. Before an audience of all colors and backgrounds, Tiana stepped to the podium to speak at the swearing-in of Judge Amara Patterson, a former public defender known for her integrity. "When I walked into this room a year ago," Tiana began, her voice low but steady, "I never imagined I would stand here today. All I wanted was to prove that the injustices we see every day are not random. They are measurable outcomes. Justice doesn't belong only to judges or lawyers. It belongs to all of us, and when it fails one person, it has failed everyone." Behind her, Dr. Olivia Bennett stepped forward to announce the National Judicial Reform Scholarship, expanded to support students passionate about improving the justice system. The first 20 fellows rose to their feet, faces of every color, every background. On their chests gleamed a small pin, the scales of justice, slightly tilted, being set right again. Inside the courthouse that once symbolized oppression, the air was entirely different. On the walls now hung multilingual posters outlining citizens' rights in 8 languages. Volunteers in blue shirts guided visitors through legal forms. A large digital screen in the lobby displayed real-time sentencing data, open for all to see. Her father smiled. "The courthouse outside looks the same," he said softly. "But inside, everything's changed." Harrison disappeared from public life, disbarred, his wealth drained by class action lawsuits. Prosecutor Mark Phillips, once his protege, now worked for the Ethics Commission, helping identify bias in other counties. "I stayed silent," he told a group of young prosecutors during training. "And that silence is the burden I'll carry for the rest of my life." James Davis, the father who once trembled in the courtroom, now led a support network for parents of youth entangled in the justice system. "Understanding the system is power," he told a circle of young families. "No one should ever walk into a courtroom blind." On the Davis family's kitchen table, College admission letters from top universities were stacked in neat piles. Tiana chose to study law, specializing in ethics and judicial reform. The old notebook, the one that had changed the system, was archived in the State Historical Society's Civil Rights Collection. Before leaving school, she returned to the same classroom where it all began. "I never set out to bring down a judge or become an activist," she told a group of students listening intently. "I just wrote down what I saw, day after day, and when the time came, I chose to stand, even when it would have been easier to bow." She lifted a new notebook, identical to the old one. "This is my strongest weapon, not because of what's written inside, but because it represents a promise to the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it is." On the projector screen behind her, a line from her speech appeared in bold. "Justice does not run on its own. It requires vigilance, courage, and the will to rise, even in the face of injustice." The story of Tiana Davis is not just the journey of a 17-year-old girl standing up to a powerful judge. It's a profound reminder of the power of truth, persistence, and the courage to rise for justice. It reminds us that justice does not run on its own. It needs people who are willing to ask questions, challenge what's wrong, and refuse to stay silent in the face of injustice. Because silence, too, is a form of complicity. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. Every subscription helps us continue telling true stories about justice, courage, and the people who dare to stand up. What do you think about her journey? Is justice truly fair, or does it only exist when someone is brave enough to defend it? Share your thoughts below, because sometimes it only takes one person taking notes to change the world.